Hello. So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about Sarah Kane's play Phaedra's Love. So Sarah Kane is, or was, she died young, unfortunately. Sarah Kane was one of the most prominent practitioners of what was called In-Yer-Face theater, which was a particular style that developed in the UK. And Kane, in talking particularly about Phaedra's Love, characterized it as along the lines of doing on stage all of the things that the Greeks did off stage. So sex, violence, etc., done on stage. Not necessarily always successfully or convincingly, according to the critics, some of whom sort of especially critiqued the way that In-Your-Face theater did violence as a sometimes sort of schlocky B-movie horror slasher type violence that didn't particularly serve to shock or compel the audience in any way. But Phaedra's Love is a really interesting adaptation of the Hippolytus story from ancient Greek mythology. And like Marina Carr's play Phaedra backwards, Kane is not particularly devoted to one particular predecessor text. So there are elements that suggest that she draws from Euripides, there are elements that suggest she draws from Seneca, even there are elements that suggest she draws from Racine, Jean Racine. So, but the play is very different. The play is clearly not just a restaging of an earlier version of this myth. So Phaedra's Love is set, it is contemporary. It's set in a contemporary era. The characters are quite different in that they're much more violent, they're much more sexual, they're much more riddled with ennui, especially Hippolytus. So Hippolytus is in a way kind of the central figure here, and he's this sort of affluenza-ridden, disaffected prince who sits around all day, eating junk food, watching violent movies, having sex with random people, but doesn't find any pleasure or joy in anything that he does. And his detachment, this ennui, takes the place of the sort of strident, anti-woman oriented virginity of Euripides and Seneca's plays. But one of the things that Kane does, and actually in this, Phaedra is much more sort of overtly interested in seducing Hippolytus. So Phaedra is much more overt about her love for Hippolytus, and we get this scene, for instance, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about is described in stage directions. So we get this stage direction where Phaedra has come in to see Hippolytus, and he's asked her about her sexual life, and she's sort of said, "I'm your stepmother, you shouldn't be asking me about that," etc., etc. And she's sort of confronted him about his lifestyle. And she says, "Would you like your present?" It's his birthday. She says, "Would you like your present now?" Stage directions. Hippolytus looks at her, then turns back to the TV. Silence. Phaedra, "I don't know what to do." Hippolytus, "Go away. It's obviously the only thing to do." They both stare at the television. Eventually, Phaedra moves over to Hippolytus. He doesn't look at her. She undoes his trousers and performs oral sex on him. He watches the screen and eats his sweets. As he is about to come, he makes a sound. Phaedra begins to move her head away. He holds it down and comes in her mouth without taking his eyes off the television. He releases her head. Phaedra sits up and looks at the television. A long silence, broken only by the rustling of Hippolytus's sweet bag. Phaedra cries. So, this is, again, Hippolytus is sort of ennui that even in this transgressive sexual act of incest, he's not engaged. He doesn't find anything rewarding or enjoyable or whatever it is. It's simply a thing that happens. He kills time throughout the whole play. And he's deliberately cruel about that continually. But Phaedra herself, again, is in the Euripides, the Seneca, and the Racine versions. Phaedra always resists her desire to sleep with Hippolytus. In the Sarah Kane version, she doesn't. And again, that's part of this in-your-face approach to putting on stage the things that the Greeks left off. The sexual aspects of human relationships get put on stage in a way that they don't in Aristophanes, Seneca, and Racine. And we see the same kind of thing with violence, where it's put on stage in a way that it's not in the earlier versions. And I think we get maybe one of the best examples of this in the closing scene of the play. Hippolytus has been so Phaedra has accused Hippolytus of raping her, and now there's an angry mob, in part led by Theseus, who's there in disguise. So it starts. So there's a couple of random people, men and women. There's also Hippolytus, Theseus, who's in disguise, and Strophe, who's Phaedra's daughter with Theseus. So we start. It's a fairly lengthy section, so I'll try and read through it. A lot of it's stage directions, and I'll try and make as clear as possible what's going on. Man 2 holds Hippolytus. Man 1 takes a tie from around a child's neck and puts it around Hippolytus's throat. He strangles Hippolytus, who's kicked by Woman 2, as he chokes into semi-consciousness. Woman 2 produces a knife. Strophe, no. Strophe says, no, don't kill him, don't hurt him, don't kill him. Man 2 says, listen to her. Man 1 says, defending an inbred. Woman 1 says, what sort of woman are you? Theseus says, defending a rapist. Theseus pulls Strophe away from Woman 2, who she is attacking. He rapes her. The crowd watch and cheer. When Theseus is finished, he cuts her throat. Strophe says, Theseus, Hippolytus, innocent, mother, O mother. She dies. Man 1 pulls down Hippolytus's trousers. Woman 2 cuts off his genitals. They are thrown onto the barbecue. The children cheer. A child takes them off the barbecue and throws them at another child, who screams and runs away. Much laughter. Someone retrieves them and they are thrown to a dog. Theseus takes the knife. He cuts Hippolytus from groin to chest. Hippolytus's bowels are torn out and thrown onto the barbecue. He's kicked and stoned and spat on. Hippolytus looks at the body of Strophe. Hippolytus says, Strophe. Theseus says, Strophe. Theseus looks closely at the woman he has raped and murdered. He recognizes her with horror. When Hippolytus is completely motionless, the police, who have been watching, wade into the crowd, hitting them randomly. The crowd disperses with the exception of Theseus. Two policemen stand looking down at Hippolytus. Policeman 1, poor bastard. Policeman 2, you joking? He kicks Hippolytus hard. I've got 2 daughters. Policeman 1, we should move him. Policeman 2, let him rot. Policeman 2 spits on Hippolytus. They leave. Hippolytus is motionless. Theseus is sitting by Strophe's body. Theseus. Hippolytus, son, I never liked you. To Strophe, I'm sorry, didn't know it was you. God forgive me, I didn't know. If I'd known it was you, I'd never have. To Hippolytus, you hear me, I didn't know. Theseus cuts his own throat and bleeds to death. The 3 bodies lie completely still. Eventually, Hippolytus opens his eyes and looks at the sky. Hippolytus, vultures. He manages a smile. If there could have been more moments like this. Hippolytus dies. The vulture descends and begins to eat his body. So again, we've got overt violence, gory violence, some of which, again, it's hard to imagine staging it without it sort of looking like a crappy horror movie with like fake guts falling out and things like this. But at the same time, it's picking up on the violence throughout Greek tragedy, because so many people are brutally murdered, so many people are maimed, so many people are in one way or another subject to tremendous physical violence. And so Kane's goal, as she said, was to put on stage the things that the Greeks refused to. And again, part of it is about this pervasive sense that, and Hippolytus is representative of this pervasive sense that we're culturally benumbed to violence and sexuality in the modern world, where we have so much TV, movies, music, as well as things like the news, which continually depict violence, continually depict sexuality, etc., etc. This idea that we can in some way be shocked out of it and that's a worthwhile ambition is one of the goals of In-Your-Face theater.